Hello everyone and welcome to this newest edition of Aeronautica. This is Remlace from 40k Theories.
Hi everyone, this is Fiora. How are you all doing? I'm back.
And today we're going to take a look at the aircraft from the Imperial Navy.
Alright, so before we begin, the way I'm going to approach these vehicles is I'm going to see how they can potentially fly, what they can do to maneuver or avoid damage. Their armament's going to be the next thing I look at. And lastly, I'm going to look at how well they react to a hit. I'm going to examine their utility and how physically possible the claims around their speed, maneuverability, weaponry, and other capabilities are versus what is represented by the statistics presented to us, as well as by what I can tell from taking the vehicles apart and shoving them into a wind tunnel to achieve lift-to-drag ratios in a 1/40th scale environment.
So, without further ado, let's start with the first vehicle on our list today, which is the Avenger Strike Fighter. Now, the Avenger Strike Fighter its main role is conducting high-speed, low-level attacks on ground targets, including tank columns and heavily armoured troops. And it's extremely heavily armed, with the Avenger bolt cannon and twin las cannons, and is actually quite considered to be quite the holy aircraft as well, as this Sisters of Battle would attest.
Okay. So first off, I'm sick, so if I cough, I apologize. I'm almost over it. But in the meantime, I think this is actually the first time this has ever happened. This aircraft doesn't fly. And I don't mean it just doesn't fly. The angled wings are actually counterintuitive to lift.
Oh.
Instead of generating up force, they generate down force. That's right, these wings act the same way as a Formula One racer's wings do, and generate a total of negative 0.77 lift to drag, meaning they push the aircraft down, not up.
Well, I suppose that'd be good in a way for, considering the fact it's got to do low atmospheric attack runs.
It's supposed to do low level, but if you were expecting, maybe hovering or slamming into the ground low level, I don't think that's what you were going for. But as soon as you accelerate forwards, it's going to go right into the ground or skim against it before it slams into something at high speed, as it looks for, a set of wheels to support it or something to keep it off of the ground. I'm sorry, that's the first time this has happened. We sat there and we watched and it went over the wing. And I'm like, that means it's generating downforce. And the other engineers went, yep.
So we're not off to a good start, are we?
No, we're not. Firepower-wise, it has just enough to be a ground support aircraft. I mean, the multi-lasers, heavy bolter, the las cannons, or hunter-killer missiles, good enough for a couple strafing runs and return back to base. This seems like it's designed more as a as an early anti-tank World War II aircraft, where you go in, drop your load, and then run back to base real quick to rearm and refit. Meaning that its air support time is probably going to be really limited, assuming it'll get off the ground, and it's just not going to be there all day long. Now, armor-wise, I'm pretty sure they took a cue from the Space Marines. At the 1/40th scale, this thing has 80 millimeters of armor, which is the same amount of armor as a Panzer IV-H in late 1944. Why?
Which for an aircraft is pretty good.
For an aircraft, that's amazing. I understand why you have so much armor on it, though. If it's only going to get 20 meters off the ground, you probably want to make sure it's bullet resistant.
And ground resistant, and rock resistant, and everything resistant, let's be honest.
Rock resistant, tree resistant, hummingbird resistant.
Random rabbit resistance.
So yeah, it doesn't fly. And it's made for quick in and out attacks, if you don't mind what's basically a medium hover tank.
Well, let's see if the next aircraft on our list can do better. The Thunderbolt Air Superiority Fighter. Now, these aircraft are built around an armoured superstructure and cockpit with twin F122V afterburning turbofans, giving the Thunderbolt a good top speed in atmospheric flight, while a rocket booster engine allows it to operate in the vacuum of space and for fast takeoffs when mounted on ground-based hydraulic ramps. But it shouldn't be confused with a true starfighter like, say, the Fury Interceptor. It's armed mainly with 2 nose-mounted las cannons and 4 nose-mounted autocannons, as well as the secondary armament of 4 Hellstrike missiles or 4 bombs.
Good news, everyone! It flies. Bad
Hooray!
news. We have a firm belief it's a war crime waiting to happen.
What?
Okay, first and foremost about this aircraft. When we were taking it apart, we had a very, very long discussion about what the center of the fuselage actually contained because of all the extra wiring and everything going into it, and we couldn't really figure it out for a moment unless it was a reactor.
What?
Aircraft should not be powered by a reactor. And after checking some lore, it turns out that there are mentions of this aircraft having a reactor.
Oh.
This is a bad idea in that even a tiny little hole is going to cause it to start leaking radioactive material everywhere. And while I could sit here and talk nuclear silence and nuclear fallout for quite some time, just let it be known that it's not going to explode, but a meltdown would be very bad for your airbase. Moving on. It has a lift-to-drag ratio of 0.81 at a speed of 400 kilometers an hour. This means that at that speed, it's only getting about 80% of the power applied to the aircraft at most. Now, we're going to plug this into our formula to see how well it actually flies. As a reminder, since it's been a little bit, our 2 formulas for determining how well an aircraft actually flies and determining how much thrust it takes to get it off the ground are as follows. Thrust divided by weight should equal lift to drag under 1. And to determine what its takeoff is, its thrust over weight equals maximum static thrust at sea level divided by maximum takeoff weight. So basically, those two equations have to equal each other in order for us to determine what a particular aspect of this aircraft is. That's why we need a lift-to-drag ratio. Scaling this up from 1 to 140, this aircraft would weigh in excess of 70 tons if it were made of aluminum.
It's aluminium. Get it right.
Which made me realize that we were actually dealing with a flying Tiger tank. However, they claim it weighs 14 tons. I'm not sure how, or of what alloy you've made this of, or what element. But I'm just going to assume 14 tons is a bit more realistic for an airplane. And they also claim it does 2,200 kilometers an hour.
It does have a rocket booster.
For this aircraft to achieve that speed, it would need 17,820,000 kilograms of force, or roughly 174,754,503 newtons of force to get off the ground. This is 97% of what you would expect to find from a Saturn V rocket booster on the space shuttle.
I assume that's what the reactor is powering then.
Yeah, I just assume that's what the reactor's powering. It's entirely plausible and possible to build this and for it to go that fast. However, for even a modern aircraft, this is definitely what would be considered substandard levels of speed. Maneuverability-wise, it could, in theory, turn at 20 degrees a second, which is pathetic. Since the front of the face of it is built like a brick, it's going to take a little bit for it to actually turn around. Firepower, quad autocannons and twin las cannons is what you would expect from a Korean War era aircraft, where you have 4 main weapons and 2 heavier punching weapons. It's good for a dogfight, but I was hoping for some missiles, Imperium. Hey, Imperium, missiles. Do you know what missiles are?
Isn't that what the secondary armament's for?
The secondary armament, as it turns out after doing the research, is only air-to-ground.
Oh.
The Imperium distinctly lack an air-to-air missile.
which is kind of weird when you think about it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suppose that's probably the reason why they created air-to-air fighters, such as the next vehicle on our list, which is the Lightning. Now, it's mainly used for establishing air superiority due to its increased maneuverability over the Thunderbolt, and is usually used as an escort for Marauder bombers, which we'll get to a bit later on. Generally, the standard armament is a long-barreled, ventral-mounted autocannon and twin-linked las cannons on the wing tips. 4 wing hardpoints allow it to carry up to 4 Hellstrike missiles, Hellfury missiles, bombs, or 6 Skystrike missiles, which I assume are air-to-air missiles. Now, while it can be used as an air-to-ground, it's not really its intended role, unless it's generally modified into the Lightning Strike variant, which is more of a ground attack-oriented aircraft. Again, it features the twin-linked las cannons, and also features up to 6 Hellstrike missiles.
Okay. Lightning keeps the previous trend going. It does fly. It flies 200 kilometers an hour faster. Flight-wise, it comes out to 0.38 lift-to-drag ratio, which is actually the same lift-to-drag ratio as the real-life P-38 Lightning, ironically. Because when I looked up Lightning, by the way, guys, 40K, the second result was P-38, and I compared the two aircraft and found they have surprisingly similar characteristics. However, saying it weighs 10 tons with that kind of lift to drag means it only takes 1,520 kilograms of force to get it off the ground, just over 1.5 tons. And that's entirely doable. I was kind of surprised how realistically feasible these aircraft are, and also how substandard they are in comparison to modern aircraft in service. I was expecting something like the Eldar that turns its pilots into paste, or the Orcs that have just crazy, silly things that barely apply, but it makes sense with physics. Not only does this make sense, it flies, and there's nothing wonky about it. There's just nothing... All of it's just well below what our modern technology can do.
And is that for both variants, the Lightning and the Lightning Strike?
Yes.
Right.
Firepower-wise, the twin las cannons would be great for close-in dogfighting because they travel at the speed of light. Therefore, you basically just point and click interface. You just have to get the crosshair over the target, and it'll hit. I'm glad the Hellstrike missiles on this one can be replaced with some air-to-air missiles. Gives you a longer range fighting capability, i.e. way off in the distance, beyond the horizon, assuming they have the technology to see that at all. But looking at the Lightning, I'm just kind of shocked it's not faster or more maneuverable or anything. It just has a good lift-to-drag ratio. It has a decent turning rate. I would compare it to a Super Sabre or a MiG-20. Firepower-wise, for the dogfight, for the ground variant, I'm not sure I would want to put an autocannon on it, honestly. Just because the las cannons would seem to be the better choice for anti-tank, anti-ground operations, but I suppose you'd want to put an autocannon on it if you wanted to spray a bunch of infantry.
So in essence, the Lightning it's serviceable.
It's a solid, serviceable interceptor if it's somewhat very slow compared to everything else we've looked at.
A plain Jane.
Yes.
Fair enough. Well, let's move on to the next vehicle then, which is the Marauder Bomber. Oh, we do like our bombers, don't we? Now, within its heavily armoured superstructure, the Marauder Bomber carries an internal bomb bay which carries up to 6,000 pounds of explosives, which at maximum capacity can carry up to 12 bombs or 6 heavy bombs, while 4 wing-mounted pylons allowed to carry an additional 12 bombs. It can also be used in atmospheric and space flight as well, which makes it quite versatile. And for additional firepower, it carries a pair of twin-linked las cannons in its nose, while 2 sets of twin-linked turret-mounted heavy bolters also are attached to it, one in the tail section and one atop the fuselage. Now, there are a few variants, one of which is the Marauder Colossus, which is pretty much the Marauder bomber, but delivers just a single 10,000 kilogram Colossus bomb. And you have the Marauder Destroyer, which is a ground attack variant which sacrifices bomb payload in favor of direct firepower, such as 6 nose-mounted autocannons, 2 rear turret-mounted assault cannons, and 2 dorsal turret-mounted heavy bolters, as well as 8 Hellstrike missiles.
Let me start with the following, because the first thing I read about this aircraft, bombers do not serve air interdiction roles. Just straight up. It's just not how it works. They lack maneuverability. They often carry heavy anti-ground weapons and are much bigger targets for smaller, more agile aircraft. That much said. Next thing, into its flight characteristics. I can see what they're going for here with the design between the B-1, which basically looks like the wings and engines of a B-1 Lancer merged onto a B-17 Flying Fortress, and then failing horrifically. Between the front end, the super blocky nature of its wings and fuselage, and the fact the aircraft is just a huge flat tank, its lift-to-drag ratio is measured at 2.7, which the space shuttle, hell, the space capsule that fell back to Earth after moon landings, is more aerodynamic. When the flying brick and the falling concrete slab are considered more aerodynamic than you, you have an issue. It says it does 1,800 kilometers an hour or 1.458 Mach, which makes me wonder why you have the defensive excuse me, armament at all. Because if you're flying that fast, the people aiming your defensive armament for the most part can't hit anything. But honestly, it straight up won't fly. Even if we tried a calculation where we strapped 4 Saturn V rocket boosters to it to get it off the ground, and it wouldn't. No amount of math would get that off the ground.
Which is a shame.
As far as firepower is concerned, it has the same defensive capabilities you would expect of a supersonic version of a B-17. The heavy bolters I see completely ineffective at these speeds, because you're going to aim at the target, and by the time the bolt gets 100 meters from the aircraft, the wind shear it's experiencing is going to throw it so far off course that you're lucky if you hit the same postcode as where you aimed the shot. But at least the last cannons will be point and shoot.
Can we talk about the bombs yet?
Let's talk about the bombs. So 6,000 pounds of bombs. 6,000 pounds. Let me look this up real quick.
Or the 10,000 kilogram Colossus bomb.
So you want to talk 6,000 pounds or 10,000 pounds of explosives.
No, not 10,000 pounds, 10,000 kilograms, which is around 220,000 pounds.
Let's just make this easy. 10 metric tons. That is entirely feasible. The B-29 Super Fortress carries 9,100 kilograms of bombs. B-17 Standard carried 7,200 kilograms of bombs. It is entirely feasible for it to carry that much explosive. Period. I would expect these to be used in mass formations.
And as you said, since they're vulnerable to smaller aircraft, that explains, why they're escorted by the Lightnings.
Yes, because I'm imagining their heavy bolters don't hit very often.
But in fact, since it's a bolt round, if it does hit, it's going to create an explosion.
That's true. That's very true. It also explains why aircraft have 80 millimeters of armor, because a bolt round won't go through that.
True. And what about the ground attack variant?
The ground attack variant, the Marauder Destroyer, I can see adding the additional night vision equipment and removing the bombs for autocannons, because basically when you're doing night attacks, you're going to not have your target immediately available. So having the direct fire weaponry as opposed to bombs, which require time to line up and get in position properly to do a proper bombing run, makes more sense, because they may only get one pass over the target, and having autocannons to deliver the damage rather than a bomb that they will have to possibly fly over and then come back and line back up again because they can't see the target until they're almost on top of it in some cases. It makes more sense.
Fair enough.
Hey guys, so hope you enjoyed the video. Please go check out Warhammer 40k Theories Part 2, and please do donate on Patreon, because that's how I pay some of my bills. I'll see you guys on livestream this afternoon, and I hope you hit the like button and leave a comment. Like, really, honestly, like, let me know what you think. I actually reply to all of them. Bye!